What's up, everyone?
Hey, everybody.
Welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor live video. This week on a Monday. Normally we do these weekly videos on Sundays, but yesterday was the Super Bowl, so we're coming to you on a Monday.
Yeah, we didn't want to compete with the Super Bowl. Hope you guys understand.
Yeah, I mean, we're fun to listen to, but it's quite the competition. So tonight we're going to be talking about travel therapy as a pair. Talk about some of the pros and cons, some of the considerations. This is a question that we've gotten probably about 3 times in the last week, so we thought we'd do a video on it. There are some considerations that pairs have to take into account that maybe an individual solo traveler wouldn't. So we're going to talk about some of that. We have some announcements to make, some exciting things coming up tonight. So Whitney's going to introduce us, and then we're going to jump right into talking about travel therapy as a pair.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'll do some quick introductions for those that may not be familiar with us. My name is Whitney Aiken.
And I'm Jared Kazazza.
And we are both traveling physical therapists. We are coming up on our 5th year of traveling as travel PTs. And we have a website, Travel Therapy Mentor, where we mentor other people who are current traveling therapists or aspiring to be future travel therapists. As Jared said, we try to bring you guys these weekly videos, usually on Sunday or Monday nights, about various travel therapy topics. Tonight we are coming at you from the car office, and this might be the last time, probably the last
Carfus.
time. The car office.
Carfus.
It's not. Anyway, hopefully this will be the last night that we are coming at you from the car office with all the lovely distractions in the background, because we are in the gym parking lot in lovely Goldsboro, North Carolina. The reason we're coming at you from the car office, if you've tuned in before, is for this contract we are staying in our camper and we don't have good internet there. So sometimes we come to the gym parking lot at Gold's Gym after we work out, which we just did, and we use their Wi-Fi. So that's why we're here. But some announcements. This will be my last week of my current travel PT contract. It's hard to believe 13 weeks goes by so fast. So Friday's my last day at work, and we're going to be moving back to Virginia. And the big announcement is that we have about 99% sure sold our camper, our fifth wheel, and our truck. So some of you guys may be familiar with our old blog and our situation called Fifth Wheel PT. So we have lived on and off in our fifth wheel for the past 4.5 or so years. And for a while we had it in storage there, and we were thinking about selling it, and we didn't sell it. We lived in it again for this contract, but we decided we're ready to really sell it this time. And we just don't want to leave it in storage all the time when we're traveling out of the country a lot. So we have a potential buyer. I'm pretty sure they're going to buy it and take it on Saturday. We have a deposit on it. So it might be our last week ever of living in the camper, which is interesting, but I'm not going to say it for sure yet. We'll know for sure on Saturday, but it's pretty much done.
And it's kind of bittersweet. We've had a lot of good memories in that camper. It's been 4 years now since we bought it, and obviously that's what the name for the blog started with. And I don't know if I would have even started a blog if it wasn't for living in the fifth wheel and that being a unique thing. So, but it is going to be really nice to not have to keep it in storage the majority of the year. So it'll save us some money while we're out of the country.
Yeah, and if you're wondering what we're talking about being out of the country, right now Jared and I only work sometimes as travel PTs. We only take contracts here and there because we spend a lot of time traveling for fun. So as soon as we leave here, we're going to be going in about 5 weeks to our next big international adventure, where we will be traveling for 5 months in Latin America. So we'll be going through Mexico, Central America, and South America from March till August. So we got a lot of fun things coming up between now and when we leave for that trip. We are going to CSM. So for those of you guys that are PTs or PTAs or PT students, you might be familiar with CSM, the APTA's combined section meeting. We are going to be there this year. I can't believe it's next week. It's like a week from tomorrow we leave and go to Denver. So we will be there, and if you guys have been following along on our social media, you might know that we are hosting a travel therapy meetup at CSM in Denver this year.
And right now we have 109 people potentially going on the Facebook event, either going or interested, which is nuts. So it's going to be probably a pretty big event.
Yeah, so we're actually pretty much maxed out at RSVPs. We were going to max it out at 75, and we have 109 potential. So if you haven't RSVP'd already, please send us a private message if you are interested in coming, because we really probably can't accept many more people at all. So we're probably at this point going to close it out for students and only accept current travel PTs and current PTs that are thinking about traveling. So message us if you're interested, if you're going to be at CSM. But anyway.
And even if you're not interested in going to the meetup, we'd still love to meet you guys outside of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be at the conference. We'll be mixing and mingling at the conference, going to some of the sessions, and hanging out at one of the booths as well.
All right, so let's talk about the pros and cons.
And before we do that, I see a bunch of you guys have hopped on because Jared shared our video in a couple of groups. If you guys wouldn't mind saying hello in the comments, I see a bunch of you guys are on. Hey Jeff, hey Nicole, hi Mallory, and a bunch more. Please say hello in the comments and let us know that you're there and we're not just talking to a screen.
Yeah, let us know if you're students interested in travel, or you current travel therapists, or are you therapists interested in traveling?
Yeah, and we want to know if you're a couple, if you're a pair. Hopefully, if you're watching this, maybe you are thinking about traveling as a pair, and we can give you some insight based on our 4+ going on 5 years of traveling as a pair.
Yeah, if you're a current travel pair, let us know how's the experience been for you traveling as a pair, and if you're interested in traveling as a pair in the future and you have any questions, feel free to ask, and we'll answer those as we go.
Yep. Hey Jeff, thanks for joining. I know Jeff and Megan are on their first travel assignment, and they've decided to extend. They are our people because we extend a lot, so we'll talk about that.
All right, so there's two main areas that traveling as a pair differs from traveling as an individual. The main areas are housing and finding jobs. The reason, there's other things that we'll talk about, but those are the two big areas that you have to consider when traveling as a pair. Housing, there's some pros and cons of traveling together versus traveling as an individual. One of the pros is that if you get an apartment as a couple, obviously, versus an apartment as an individual, you're going to split the cost, so it's usually cheaper. On the other hand, though, a downside of traveling as a pair is that you can, but there's not many people that are willing to rent out a room in a house to a couple or a pair. Whereas I know a lot of individual travelers that will just rent a room in a house wherever their assignment is. So we get a lot of times people will say, like, we've saved a lot of money traveling, and we'll get people saying, like, yeah, you guys have saved a lot of money because you were able to split expenses. And that is true, but there are also a lot of individual travelers that save a ton of money because they just rent a room in a house that might be $400 or $500 a month. So, that's kind of a pro and a con.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you really have to keep in mind, like, yeah, you could rent a room in a house as a pair, but it's not going to be that comfortable for you with being two people sharing whatever that situation might be with the bathroom, with the host, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and in our experience, landlords don't really want to rent a room in a house to a pair.
Yeah. So in some ways you can save on housing costs, and others you can't. Or if you were like us and you decided to go the fifth wheel and camper or the RV route, in some ways we saved money, but once everything's said and done, we'll let you guys know kind of where we came out financially. I'm not going to spoil it right now because we haven't actually sold it yet, but if we do sell it on Saturday, we will let you guys know in future announcements how we came out financially. But suffice to say, you might come out ahead, but you're not going to come out as ahead as you think. It's really, if you decide to travel in a camper, it's really more for the lifestyle and the convenience aspect of it. You're probably going to break about even on costs depending on how long you travel.
Exactly.
And depending on if you buy the camper used. But I do think there's some lifestyle factors that make traveling as a couple in a fifth wheel or a camper easier. So there's pros and cons to that, and that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, in
traveling
terms of
in a camper.
In terms of finances, the primary factor in whether a camper makes sense is how long you're going to travel in the camper, like Whitney said.
Yeah.
Another factor that might play into the decision if you're a couple that maybe is on the fence about getting a camper is having pets, or even not a couple, even just an individual. If you have, like, say, 2 dogs, it's a lot easier to find housing for 2 dogs or pets if you're in a camper, because you just pay for the campground versus trying to find pet-friendly housing, which obviously you can do, but it's usually more expensive.
Yeah. So basically, when you're thinking about traveling as a couple, there's a lot of considerations going into choosing your housing. In some regards, you might save money because you can split expenses. In some regards, it might be more challenging because you need to find a space that will accommodate two.
Yep.
Okay, so the next part
is job availability. So obviously, this is a very common question we get is like, okay, I want to travel with another therapist. Is it possible to find 2 jobs in the same area? And this was a very important question that we had when we started as well. And the answer is yes, you can, but it is a little more difficult than finding one job, obviously, because you need to have two that are close enough that you can commute either direction. So for us, that usually means trying to find two jobs where we can live in the middle, or two jobs at the same facility, or, kind of in the same direction. But we're not ones that are willing to do like an hour commute. We're not going to do that. So we need to find two jobs that are relatively close together. So obviously that limits your options a little bit as a pair.
Yeah, so this is the biggest hurdle that you have to overcome. And if many of you say you're getting ready to get started with travel therapy, or even if you're on your first couple assignments, you're probably feeling this struggle right now. Just the back and forth of when you're looking for your contracts as an individual is challenging enough. So jobs might be presented to you and they might be gone the same day. That jobs don't just sit open. And there's a lot of back and forth of, well, do I want to interview for that one? If I'm working with more than one recruiter, how does that work? Am I waiting to hear back about this other one because I already have an interview with this one? And now multiply that by 2. It's very complicated, but it's doable. So there's some strategies that we've learned over 5 years that we want to recommend to you guys. A few things that you want to do in advance if you're a pair is make sure you have at least 2 to 3 really good state licenses. So what I mean by good state licenses is do your research on which licenses tend to have, or which states tend to have the most jobs for your discipline. So say you're from New England, or you want to travel in New England, and you get licensed in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York. Or Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Delaware, let's say. Well, yeah, you have 3 state licenses, but those licenses suck. Like, you're not going to find a ton of jobs.
They don't suck. There's just not a ton of travel jobs in
for
those
travel jobs.
states.
You're not going to find a ton of jobs in Rhode Island, Delaware, and Connecticut, especially not for 2 jobs together, because they're really small states and they don't tend to have a lot of travel needs.
Yeah, so any good recruiter should be able to help you out with letting you know which states usually have the most jobs on average for your discipline. And this changes over time. We found that we chose all of our state licenses based on which states tended to have the most outpatient PT jobs. And over time, those things have shifted. So now those jobs those states that we got licensed in don't have as many jobs as they used to. So, the trends change over time. So you need to stay on top of that.
Yeah.
But yes, having multiple state licenses in states that have on average a higher number of jobs is a very good idea.
Yeah, I would say this is like one of the first big pieces to the puzzle, because as we always recommend to fellow therapists and travelers, and hopefully you're hearing from others, is it's best to have the license in hand already before submitting to jobs. There are some recruiters that will say, oh no, we'll just apply to the job and then get the license afterwards. In our experience, it works out sometimes, but more than likely you're going to get screwed over trying to do it that way. And especially as a pair, it's probably not going to work out too well for you.
I'd even say it works out the majority of the time, but there are a percentage of the time when the license doesn't go as planned. So say you interview for a job, it sounds wonderful, and you're like, all right, I'm going to take this job, starts in 2 weeks, I just need to get this license. And say it's a state that usually issues a license in 2 weeks. Everything should be great. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. And when it's not, that's terrible, because then not only do you end up missing weeks of work, but the facility is stuck without a traveler. And then when you start, they're already behind, and sometimes it's not the best environment to go into. So you want to have the license up front.
Sometimes it works out. Like, for example, I know our friends Jeff and Megan that are on their first assignment, and they had a couple licenses and they weren't working out, and they ended up getting their Virginia license just sort of at the last minute because they weren't finding anything else, and it went really fast. They had it within a week, and then they were able to get the job they were looking at for that. And sometimes there are what are called quick license states that your recruiter can point you in the direction of. They might say, okay, I know this job is available. It doesn't have a ton of submissions, meaning not a lot of people are looking at this job right now. So more than likely the facility will interview you without a license. They'll agree to, and then you might have time to go ahead and get the license over the next 2 weeks. But I just wouldn't rely on it.
Yeah, and one caveat to that is if your home state is a compact state and you're looking in other compact states, it might be okay to not get the license, right away. Instead, look for jobs, because that's a much quicker process.
Yeah, because we talked about the compact, I think it was last week. So if you're a PT, watch that video, because that one actually, if you have a compact privilege, to get the new compact privilege in a new state is very quick. So that actually really helps you in some ways if you're a PT pair.
All right, Mallory said, hi, graduating in April. My husband graduates in December. We want to travel. Are you guys PTs, OTs, SLPs? Let us know. Armand says, hey guys, hello again. back home in PA now. Just wrapped up my contract on Friday. Awesome. Hope you're having a good time off. Bree says, graduating in May, ready to start travel ASAP. Are you traveling with a partner, or are you traveling by yourself, Bree?
All right, Jeff. So here's Jeff chiming in with him and Megan's experience on their first contract search.
He said, definitely took some time to find a place accepting 2 people. We decided to finally just get a fully furnished townhome. We love it so far. I think it's worth paying a little more to have our own place.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point.
If you're going to pick any state in New England, choose Mass. Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's exactly what we did. We wanted to go to New England, and we looked at all the options up there. We ideally wanted to go to Maine, but after, like we talked about, looking at the states that have the most jobs, we went with Massachusetts, and we ended up working in Massachusetts for about 6 months.
Yep, we always recommend. For some reason, Massachusetts has a ton of jobs, and if you guys need advice, we can try to point you in the direction of which states, in our experience, have had a lot of jobs, but also the recruiters tend to have their thumb on the market better than we do, and they kind of understand that better. So if you guys are interested in knowing which recruiters we recommend, which we'll talk about that here in a little while too, just comment recruiter in the comments, and we can send you some information to get you in touch with good ones that can help you through this process. We work with a ton of recruiters that have been very helpful with pairs.
Yep.
So we can help you with that. So the next piece to this puzzle that we do want to talk about, besides having good state licenses up front, is having good recruiters. So we always recommend that travelers work with at least 3 recruiters. People always ask us, how does that work? How do you work for more than one company? You don't work for them, you work with them, which means you stay in contact with them. So to be a travel therapist, you're just a free agent, just floating around doing whatever you want to do all the time. And you can talk to as many recruiters as you would like to talk to. And then during your job search, they can all be hunting down jobs for you and presenting options to you, and you can choose to take interviews with 5 different companies, and then just accept one of them, and then you're only on contract with that one during that contract, that 13 weeks. So we always recommend all therapists pick 3 and have 3 good ones. Now, sometimes as a pair, we might even recommend that you open up your search to 4 or 5. Now, beyond that, it's really not worth it, because a lot of times they're going to have a lot of the same jobs, but they will have outliers. So having that 3 to 4, I think, is a good range to have enough different jobs. But once you get to numbers 6, 7, 8, they're going to have a lot of the similar jobs, and you're just wasting their time and yours.
Yeah, you're going to get, it's going to be a lot of hassle too, keeping in contact with that many people. So yeah, 3 to 4 is probably really the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Mallory said we will both be PTs. So that's a good lead into what we want to talk about.
I have one more thing about recruiters.
Yeah.
So people often ask me or ask us if you work with the same recruiter as a pair. Ideally, you work with the same group of recruiters. So you guys should talk to as a couple or as a partner. If you're 2 friends or whatever, 2 classmates, whatever it might be, talk to the same 3 recruiters, because all of them are kind of like a team for you. So you're teaming up with recruiter A, and they know that you're looking for 2 jobs. You're also teaming up with recruiter B, and you're teaming up with recruiter C, and each one knows you have to have 2 jobs. Now, it might be that you end up during your search, recruiter A has 1 job in, I don't know, let's say Los Angeles, and recruiter B has a different job in Los Angeles, and one of you submits to a job with recruiter A and the other one with recruiter B. Or maybe it might not be Los Angeles, but maybe it's like a close by city. And so sometimes we're always playing around with like Google Maps. So we'll say, like, what do you have in Virginia? And recruiter A will send us the 5 jobs they have in Virginia, and recruiter B will send us their list, and yada yada. And we're like playing around with the map to see if any of them are near each other. And one important thing that you want to notice, or want to note, is if 2 of them tell you it's the same city, you have to say, can you please tell me what facility it is so I can make sure it's not the same as the other recruiter, because quite often it will be. You'll get excited, you'll think, wow, there's 2 jobs there, but really it's the same job, and you want to make sure you don't get submitted for the same job by 2 recruiters.
Yep. And when Whitney's talking about working with multiple recruiters, that means 1 recruiter from different companies.
Right.
So you wouldn't be working with 2 recruiters at the same company. It would be like recruiter from this company, recruiter from this company, recruiter from this company.
Right.
So Mallory said we'll both be PTs. So in terms of discipline, right now, the 2 disciplines with the most jobs are PTs and SLPs. So a pair of PTs is most of the time in good shape. You can usually find something that will work for you. A pair of SLPs, same way. I mean, SLP job market is the best right now. So a pair of SLPs traveling together are probably going to be in really good shape. Or a mix of a PT and SLP are probably going to be able to find jobs. Meanwhile, OTs the job market is not as great for OTs right now. And then for assistants, it's even worse right now. So for like a pair of PTAs or a pair of CODAs, or even a pair of OTs, it's a tough time right now to find jobs. So you have to be definitely more lenient there. And to add to that, if you are a pair of different disciplines, usually I would recommend that you, whichever discipline has the fewer number of jobs, if you get in a situation where you have to take one job and wait for another job to open up in the area, the discipline with the fewer number of jobs should probably be the one to accept a job first.
Absolutely.
And that just makes more sense because the discipline that has more jobs is more likely to find one in that radius around the job that the other person accepted.
Yep. So that's actually a really good point. If you are like Jared said, if any opportunity arises where you're in a couple where the other one has a more job availability, it's really important to take that into account. We typically don't recommend for most couples that you take one job and wait for a second. Typically. However, what'll happen is sometimes you'll be trying to find two together and you will have passed on so many jobs that were just one. And then it gets down to the deadline. Now, you in general have to be less picky as a pair. But especially when it gets down to your deadline, like your anticipated start date, and you're talking about being out of work for multiple weeks if you don't go ahead and take something, this is when you have to be much less picky. So say you really wanted 2 outpatient jobs, but they just aren't coming along. Now one of you needs to at least be more flexible on the setting, or one of you needs to be more flexible on maybe the radius, a distance that you're looking from each other. Or at worst case scenario, if there is one really good job and it's going to mean that both of you are going to continue to miss week after week of work before you can find something together, as a last resort, yes, take one job and then look for a second one in the area. And sometimes you have to accept that you might end up just taking a PRN job and not finding a job.
Yeah, and that's only when the market's tight. Like right now, we've made videos about this. The job market for travelers is much more tight than it used to be. So you have to be a little more, like Whitney said, flexible. And then you also might have to do things that you normally wouldn't do. So yeah, ideally find 2 jobs in the same location. If you try that for a while, it's not working out. It's better for one person to have a job and be looking for one around that than to both of you be out of work.
Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is what happens if you're on contract and you guys have both found contracts and one person gets canceled. This is also a risk that you run when you're traveling as a pair, a healthcare pair. So this has happened to us one time where only out of like 5 years, I think we've gotten one contract canceled. It was mine. And what we chose to do, we looked around to see, we were considering him putting in his notice and then us taking 2 different jobs somewhere else. But what we ended up being able to do was I was able to secure another contract in the same region. So Jared was able to stay at his job, and then I was able to find another one in that area. And I had to end up commuting a little further because at this point you're kind of locked in, you're locked down on that situation. You don't have a lot of choice, and it wasn't great, but we made it work.
Yeah, that's the ideal situation, is that you can find another one in the area. If that doesn't work out, then look for PRN options for the one that was canceled, or worst case scenario, the other one might have to put in notice depending on how far along it is into the contract. So if it's in the very beginning and one gets canceled, maybe the other one have to, just so they don't, you both, or one person doesn't go without work for a couple months.
Yep.
But ideally look for one in the same area, or maybe look for PRN work for the one that got canceled.
Okay, so another thing about logistics that we want to talk about, say you guys have gone ahead and secured a contract, sometimes, or 2 contracts. Like Jared said earlier, sometimes you could be in the same facility. We've worked in the same facility before.
Many times, yeah.
Or sometimes you might be at different ones quite often, depending on how far away they are, that sort of thing. Oh, well, I was going to talk about something, but I want to do an interjection before I talk about that thing. Talking about how far away they are. Sometimes recruiters will try to push you into thinking things are going to work out better than they are. They'll say, oh, there's job A over here and job B over here. Look, it's only an hour apart. So if you live right in the middle, it'll be 30-minute commute for each. Wow, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, you really need to do your research, because who's to say there's going to be housing right in the middle, you know? Like, who's to say there's going to be a place to live exactly in the middle? A lot of times we find it's like a rural area, and more than likely you're going to both end up living over here, and one of you's driving 5 minutes and one of you's driving 60.
Yeah, that happens a lot. At least for us, when we take a lot of these rural contracts, in the middle of two rural towns, there's usually not a lot there.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely something to consider.
So the other thing I want to talk about in this situation with the logistics is cars and transportation, like deciding whether you're going to bring 1 or 2 cars. We pretty much have, I think every single time, always brought 2 cars. We have only worked on the East Coast, so the furthest we ever had to go away for a contract was about 14 or 15 hours from home.
Yeah.
So we've always taken 2 vehicles. Now, I know some people have issues with this. If they move all the way across the country, what are they going to do about it, right? So what are some options for that?
I mean, you can ship your car. We always recommend driving 2 cars, just driving separately. Obviously, that's not ideal on a road trip, because people like to travel together and point things out and talk, and it gets kind of lonely traveling by yourself. But that's always the most economical option.
Yeah.
If you ship a car, sometimes it can be pretty expensive, especially if it's a long way.
Yeah.
We've heard as high as like $1,500 to $2,000 to ship a car across the country.
Yeah.
So obviously, gas prices are going to be a lot cheaper than that cost would be. So we always recommend driving together.
I mean, you could tow a car.
You could tow a car.
Depending
You could take one car and rent a car.
Yeah.
Somebody the other day was asking us if they could just take one car and buy a car there. All those things are additional hassle when you're trying to get settled in. We wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah. So the last little thing we want to talk about here, just sort of in terms of pros and cons, as you can imagine, when you're traveling as a pair, one of the big pros that we think is you always have a buddy, right? Like, you always have a travel partner. It makes it easier to transition to a new place. You always have somebody to explore the area with, all that. But actually, in some regards, like, sometimes it can be a con, because sometimes it holds you back from making new friends in the area. I think we find this a lot, where we just sort of rely on each other and we don't go out of our way to make friends in the area.
Yeah.
So it's just something to think about. But
yeah, we look at it mostly as a pro, because we can go to rural areas of the country and still we have each other, even if there's not a lot to do in the area. Whereas if we were single travelers, we'd probably go more to bigger cities.
yeah.
So real quick, if you guys could like this video, if you're getting value from the video, we're going to go through some comments.
Yeah, and that's mostly what we want to talk about in terms of traveling as 2 healthcare providers. We also want to touch on traveling with a non-healthcare provider. So if you guys have more questions about traveling as 2 therapists or 2 healthcare providers, please ask and we'll answer them. But talking a little bit, shifting gears a little bit, just talking about non-healthcare provider partner, the biggest question we get is like, how does that work and what does the other person do?
Yeah, and the answer is very individual, based on the couple, based on the person. We know some people that have been students, online students. We know people that have just picked up odd jobs in the area. We know people that have worked online. There's a variety of things that a partner can do. It just depends on their skill set and the situation. So those are probably the main things: school, online job, or picking up work in the area.
Yep. So let's go through some questions as far as if it's 2 healthcare providers or otherwise.
Kara says, my boyfriend and I are both PTs. We're going on our 4th year of travel. I'd love to hear more on what recruiters and companies you guys recommend for pairs.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll definitely send you a message after this, Kara.
And if anybody else is interested in which recruiters we've worked with that work well with pairs, please just comment recruiters or send us a message and we will help you out.
Derek says, do you have any advice or experience with working internationally? We actually have an article on the website about working in Australia, traveltherapymentor.com. You can check out that article. In general, we don't have any experience with it, and we, for most people, recommend not doing it. And the reason for that being that most other countries, 1, the licensing process is a hassle, and 2, they don't pay as well. So basically, you're going to another country and you're getting paid less. So we recommend working in the U.S. and then traveling for fun to other countries instead of working in those countries. Joe says, hello, my girlfriend and I are both students and have reached out to multiple recruiters. We're talking to different recruiters from the same company. Do you have a recommendation on how to tell one of the recruiters you don't want to work with them? I mean,
I think that's a pretty easy situation, to be honest, because everyone knows you don't need more than 1 recruiter. So depending on what your reasoning is, for example, say if it was just 1 that you were talking to first, that's always easy because it's like, well, I was already talking to this one first. Thanks for reaching out, but I've already got a recruiter. If it's you switch from one to the other because you like the other better, just find a nice way to let them down.
I would use the excuse of, whichever one you like more. For the other one, I would say, I didn't realize my girlfriend or boyfriend is already working with a recruiter at your company, and I think we're both just going to work with them in the future.
Or whatever the excuse might be. My friend recommended this other one, and I would just prefer to work with them, or just tell them flat out, I think I'm going to move forward working with this one. It's not a big deal. Just be professional. Yep.
So if you guys have any more questions, definitely feel free to ask in the comments. Again, if you guys got value from this, please like the video, give us a thumbs up or a heart. It's always helpful and gets more people to see these videos. We are planning to do another video probably on Sunday, and we'll be back in our hometown for a few days.
Yeah, but please reach out to us. Like I said, we have going on 5 years of experience working as a pair. So if you guys have more questions beyond this video, send us a message on social media, or send us an email, a message via our website, traveltherapymentor.com. And as always, if you need recommendations for recruiters, just reach out to us and we'll help you.
Yep. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you next week.
Have a good night.
Bye.